Number 6.
Employment Relations Amendment Bill Number 2, interrupted debate on second reading.
When the bill was last being debated at the second reading, Lynn Pillay had the call. She has about 7 minutes remaining if she wishes.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker.
Lynn Pillay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I'm very pleased to stand with my colleagues or to continue my speech really in very strong opposition to this bill. I think when I was interrupted for no other reason than the House rose, Mr Speaker, last time, that I was talking about the effect on young people of the 90-day Sack-at-Will Act being extended now to every employer in the country. And I do remember when the Minister, a very short time ago, ploughed it through under urgency. Of course, the government then said, oh, well, look, this is it's only going to affect employers with employees and workplaces of over 20, wasn't it? And under 20. And, of course, now it's been extended to every workplace in New Zealand. So it's a very, very sad day for workers' rights and indeed for job creation in New Zealand. And that's the irony. That's the irony of a government who says that they are intent on creating jobs and growing the economy and getting us on a level with Australia in terms of wages and conditions. It's just a joke. It's just a joke when every step they do is to undermine the very ability for workers in New Zealand to get a fair deal. That's all it's about. It's about workers in New Zealand having the ability to get a fair deal without fear of retribution, without fear of being undermined, but to actually equalise the employment relationship. Because if anyone in New Zealand thinks that a new employee going into a workplace now with fear of being sacked in their first 90 days of employment has an equal relationship with the employer, they are dreaming. I want to acknowledge here there are many, many, many good employers in this country, Mr Speaker. Very many good employers. But actually, there are a tremendous number of good employees as well. And that's my concern, Mr Speaker, and that's the concern of people on this side of the House, is the way that all those good employees are treated, that's all right, thank you, Mr Bennett, are treated when they enter the workplace, the first 90 days of their work. And the Labour Department survey revealed that when they interviewed workers who felt vulnerable and were concerned about job security, nearly a quarter of workers were sacked in that 90-day period. Now, if anyone in New Zealand thinks that a quarter of people in the workplace are not worthy of retaining their job, well, I think that's an absolutely appalling indictment. That's what the national government obviously thinks, because they have given employers free rein to sack people, and often young people, without any reason whatsoever. Well, the reason may be they don't like their hairstyle, they've got an earring, whatever that reason is, they don't have to tell them that reason. Sorry? It's got too much sauce. Too much sauce, that's right, too much sauce on the food. And that is absolutely appalling. Now, I'm pretty sure, if my memory serves me correctly, that someone from the government benches said, well, that means that 75 people kept their jobs. Well, whoop-de-doo. If we think that the retention rate for new employees is acceptable, because that is 75% in the first 90 days, I think that's a real indictment on this government's thinking, if they are thinking. The other thing I want to talk about too, while I'm on employment rights, is also if they do manage to get through the 90 days, and then they take a case, a personal grievance, if they have been wrongfully dismissed, if they're wrongfully dismissed, under the Act as it was, or as it is now, reinstatement is the primary remedy. And I think that's a very good thing, and so does my colleague Darian Fenton. Why? Because it says that retention of employment, particularly in this environment, is the most important thing. So if an employer has unjustifiably dismissed a worker, then reinstatement should be the primary remedy. Now, we all know if the employer is an absolute bully or there's irreconcilable differences, then of course that won't continue. But it should be the remedy. By removing reinstatement as the primary remedy, Mr. Speaker, it means that a worker, even if they are dismissed unjustifiably, that is deemed by the employment court or by the whole proceedings that they are not at fault, they still don't get their job back. And they'll join the thousands and thousands and thousands of people in this country in the unemployment queue because this government is not creating jobs. So what this is doing, apart from the fact it's grossly unfair, it's offensive, it is just plain dumb. It is not about creating jobs, it's not about retaining people in work, it is just tripping back to the 90s from a government who simply cannot get out of that mode. And it is where we in New Zealand had finally, under the Labour government, put ourselves in a position where we could internationally hold our heads high because we had labour relations in this country that did stack up, and then this Back to the Future lot take us back to the 90s, back to the time of shame, back to the time of people being fearful of losing their jobs, back to the time where workers' conditions were slashed. And, oh, come on, says Mr. Bennett. Come on, the chair of the Select Committee. The government's bad enough, but that chair and the members on that committee who did not listen to the vast majority of the submitters who opposed this bill. That chair made a mockery of the Select Committee process, and I congratulate the Labour and Green members for their minority report, because what that chair did and what those members did was absolutely shocking. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You're saying it's time for me to close. I look forward to the committee stage. Thank you.